The legal troubles of Donald and the Trump regime continue to mount as they do for, lifelong criminals and recidivists. The question, as always, with Donald is will it matter? But today he's facing potential punishment essentially for treating a federal judge with such extraordinary contempt and disrespect over his and his regime's illegal deportations.
A federal judge has found probable cause that the Trump administration acted in contempt of court. This is related to Trump officials defying that judge's order to turn two planes carrying alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador around.
This is an extraordinary development, James. It's not every day that the federal district courts hold the government of the United States, the executive branch, in contempt of court in violation of a court order. This is just coming down now from Judge Jeb Boasberg, of course, an appointee of George Bush, later elevated by Barack Obama, who had been overseeing that controversial case of the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to whisk hundreds of Venezuelan alleged gang members to that prison in El Salvador back in March. He did it without giving those men any chance to appeal or challenge their removal to a third country. And what Judge Boasberg said now today, that the actions of the government at that time by sending those planes, not turning them around back in March, was a willful disregard for its order, that allowing this to go unheeded, it would be a solemn mockery of the Constitution itself.
Interesting framing. Is the extraordinary thing that a judge may well hold the executive branch in contempt? Is that really the extraordinary thing in this scenario? Or is it the fact that the executive branch defied a federal judge's orders? Is it the fact that the executive branch no longer seems to think that the rule of law applies to it? Is it the fact that the executive branch is essentially undermining one of the essential foundations of our democracy? Let me think what I think is the more extraordinary thing here. Judge Boasberg apparently does understand what's extraordinary here, and it's not his ruling. The fact that the administration, the Trump regime, did not turn those planes around was to ignore, again, a federal judge's order and disrespect the Constitution of the United States of America. The men illegally deported remain in a notorious maximum security prison called Cico in El Salvador, which is notorious because of the numerous human rights violations it commits on a daily basis. The conditions there are inhumane. Not only were these men not given due process, but alleged affiliations to the gang Trenta Aragua and their alleged crimes have not been proven. The DOJ hasn't even bothered to try to show the American people the facts they pretend to have about these men. And Bloomberg estimated that 90% of the men illegally deported have no criminal records at all. Details, Adding to the case that these deportations were not out of concern for American safety, but an act of cruelty, and I would suggest to instill fear into many of us, the government did not release the names of the deportees. Family members and lawyers found out they had been taken to El Salvador through the brutal videos and images that have come out since. Boasberg wrote in a 46-page opinion that the Trump regime has had plenty of time to heed his order. Now he's given them 1 week to file a declaration explaining themselves or to rectify their actions. Boasberg wrote that, quote, the most obvious way for defendants to do so here is by asserting custody of the individuals who were removed in violation of the court's class-wide TRO, that's temporary restraining order, so that they might avail themselves of their right to challenge their removability through a habeas proceeding, unquote. Due process, which is what everybody in this country, citizen or not, is allowed or supposed to have. If the government does not provide Judge Boasberg with these things, he will hold hearings with government witnesses under oath or depositions. This could go all the way to the court case. Let me say that again. This could go all the way to a court case where government officials involved could be tried for contempt. More judges are going after Donald's regime as well. But before we go further, please like and share this video. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We're trying to get to 400,000 subscribers as quickly as we can. As independent media, your support helps us reach more people and keeps us going. Okay, so I want to get into the Trump regime's extremely flimsy justifications for deporting innocent people who, by the way, most of whom are here legally, to a maximum security prison in another country on another continent, right? That should matter to us, shouldn't it? But I also just want to remind all of us that Donald is a convicted felon. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers on 34 felony counts in a courtroom in New York City. Throughout the course of that trial, Donald was found by Justice Juan Merchan to be in contempt of court 10 times. And yeah, nothing happened. So a reminder that the Trump regime has explained away their willful disobedience to Boasberg's orders, with Donald invoking the Alien Enemy Act of 1798. It's a wartime law allowing for the president to detain or deport people from a quote-unquote enemy nation with no due process. The Alien Enemy Act has only been invoked 3 times, and after being enacted during World War II, it laid the groundwork for one of the most egregiously racist and shameful acts in American history, the Japanese internment camps of World War II, where over 120,000 Japanese Americans, that is to say, American citizens of Japanese descent, were imprisoned. Why? For the crime of being of Japanese heritage. Families were separated. There wasn't enough food. The conditions were terrible. People suffered unimaginable abuses, and babies suffered deprivation. In 1988, the United States government formally apologized to Japanese Americans for this disgusting black mark in our history. Donald's invocation of the same act is similar. Why? Because he's using it for his own racist purposes and to be as cruel as humanly possible to an extremely vulnerable part of our population. But is it even legal? Well, I mean, I guess a better question is, does he care? I don't think he does. And will it matter? The nonprofit National Association of Foreign Student Advisors says that there are 2 bases the act can be invoked under. Basis 1, quote, whenever there shall be a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, unquote, or basis 2, quote, when any invasion or predatory incursion shall be perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government, unquote. Donald has fear-mongered that a prison gang called Tren de Aragua is invading our country, and he has used this. First of all, he has labeled this gang a terrorist organization, which it is not. There is no definition under which that would be the case, and he has used that to invoke the Alien Enemy Act. But according to El País newspaper, quote, official data places the total number of Venezuelans in the United States at 2% of its Latino residents and shows that only 0.08% are linked to their home country's most notorious criminal group, unquote. That is a vanishingly small number of people. I'm not saying it's okay to be a member of a violent gang. I'm not saying that. But you cannot use gang affiliation as an excuse to disappear people who are not part of said gang. You can't even use it as an excuse to disappear the members of the gang. Why? Because this is the United States of America, and we have a constitution, and people have rights, and there is a rule of law, and there is something known as due process. If you remove such protections for one person, you threaten them for all of us, no matter where we're from or where we were born. So less than 1% of an incredibly small population in the United States is linked to an organization that Donald has told us is a clear and present danger to us all And unfortunately, there are far too many Americans too naive, too stupid, too uneducated, or just too afraid of everything not to fall for it. Now, does this justify the act's definition of an invasion? No, of course it doesn't. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand that gang members, having chapters of their gangs in the United States it's not an invasion. We understand words and how they work and how they're defined. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, the Trump regime is illegally using this act. Yes, to fearmonger, but yes, also to excuse whatever criminal acts they want to get away with, as long as they can say that they're committing these crimes under the guise of official acts. Thank you, corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court. They argue that, quote, the Alien Enemies Act can only be used in wartime, and discriminating against immigrants based on their place of birth or ancestry violates constitutional rights. Courts have the power to stop this, and so does Congress, unquote. Sadly, even though, yes, the Republicans in Congress, because remember, they can control both houses of Congress, do have the power to do something about this, but they're fascists, so they're not going to, because they probably like it. Other judges around the country are recognizing that Donald's deportations are motivated by racism and cruelty and are moving to hold him and his Department of so-called Justice accountable. The judge presiding over Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, that's the man who was illegally deported by the Trump regime to that same prison in El Salvador, suggested Tuesday that she was weighing contempt proceedings against the Trump regime. U.S. District Judge Paula Zinnes ordered officials to turn over evidence of their efforts to help bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the United States since she first ordered them to, quote unquote, facilitate his return. Zinnes says the government had not shown her any evidence that this has happened. None. She said, quote, I've got nothing. I've got no real response and no legal justification for not answering, unquote. She has ordered officials from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security to sit for the depositions and for the Trump regime to hand over documents by the end of the month. What's the rush? What's the rush here? It's just an innocent man sitting in a notorious hellhole for having done nothing except being brown. Even the Trump regime admitted it was an administrative error that made him end up there. Can we at least have proof of life now? Can we have it now? Or do we have to wait another month for that too? Judge Zinnes said that if the administration does not comply with that part of the order, Abrego Garcia's lawyers are, quote, free to seek separate sanctions on an expedited basis, unquote. How lovely for them and him. In the wake of the Trump regime's comments, she's also expediting the process to ensure the court's rulings are followed. I cannot wait to see how that's going to play out. While the courts have made their stance clear, the regime is still fighting back. This is the disgraceful United States Attorney General Pam Bondi on Fox this morning.
We did the right thing. It was one additional step in paperwork that needed to be taken. Now he is declared as a foreign transnational gang member. So, Bill, even if President Bukele said, we'll send him back, all that would happen is one more step in paperwork and he would go right back to El Salvador because he is an MS-13 member. He is an illegal alien, and I'm sick of the liberal media saying that he's a Maryland man. He's not a Maryland man. He's a guy from El Salvador who's part of one of the most violent gangs in our country.
Okay, that is the Attorney General of the United States lying to your faces about everything having to do with this case. Abrego Garcia is in this country legally. He has followed every step he needs to follow. He is not a member of that gang, and he has no criminal record whatsoever. If he is ever returned to the United States of America, he would have every right to continue to stay here. He is a Maryland man. That is where he lives. That is where his wife and his children live. That woman should not have that position. She disgraces the Department of Justice every day she is allowed to stay there. And we are so beyond the tipping point here that people need to wake up to what's going on. And if the Republican Party is not going to do it, I'm not entirely sure how this is going to play out, because what mechanism, What enforcement mechanism do the courts have? It is going to be up to the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court to straighten this out. Well, I wish us luck, and I certainly wish Mr. Abrego Garcia luck, because he's going to need it. The only way Mr. Abrego Garcia goes back to El Salvador, if he is returned to the United States, is if, once again, the Trump regime, aided by henchmen like Pam Bondi and their Gestapo, illegally detain him and illegally deport him again. And I wouldn't put it past them. But that would mean getting him back in the first place. The legal process will play out because, again, justice grinds slow but fine, apparently. As it continues, Abrego Garcia's wife has been speaking out to the media, begging for the return of her husband. Watch this.
My name is Jennifer. I am Kilmer's wife. He is a father, a son, a brother, and a proud member of CASA and SMART Union member who has dedicated himself to make our family's American dream reality. That dream was shattered on March 12th when he was abducted and disappeared by the United States government in front of our 5-year-old child. Today is 34 days after his disappearance, and I stand before you filled with spirit that refuses to bring down. I will not stop fighting until I see my husband alive. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much.
If you can listen to that and be unmoved, then you're not human, which pretty much defines everybody in the Trump regime. And let's make no mistake about this. The United States government, as led by Donald Trump and people like Attorney General Pam Bondi, is sanctioning the disappearing of people here legally, regardless of their status. Donald Trump and people like Pam Bondi and all of those who enable them, support them, follow them, are the only terrorists in this scenario. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.